My name is Simon Dyer. I'm Policy Director with the Pembina Institute. I actually went to graduate school here at the University of Alberta 15 years ago. I don't recognize the campus these days. There's so much reconstruction, but I managed to find my way here. So I know most of the conference has been about talking about water, but I was invited to talk about some of the landscape impacts of in situ or deep oil sands development. So I hope to build on some of the excellent stuff you've heard from Bill Donahue and Leafa this morning. So the Pembina Institute is an Alberta-based energy and environment think tank. That's our fancy name, I guess. We're sort of the nerds of the environmental community. They stay in the basement and do a lot of analytical work on energy and environment impacts across Canada. About half of our staff are currently based in Alberta, in 3 offices in Drayton Valley, Edmonton, and Calgary.
Oh, thank you.
My presentation here today, the first thing I want to talk about is ask the question: what is responsible oil sands development, and is responsible oil sands development even possible? Then expand on some of the stuff we've already seen about what is in situ oil sands development, and then talk about the issue, I think, around oil sands development from Pembina's perspective, which is the issue of cumulative impacts. Finally, I want to use woodland caribou as a sort of case study in terms of why we're not really on an appropriate track, and then talk about some solutions. So Pembina has been working on oil sands issues for a long time, more than 20 years. We first appeared opposing a Syncrude project over 20 years ago. So only Suncor and Syncrude as companies on the landscape predate us here. We do a lot of research, and I encourage you to check out our website, oilsandswatch.org, where 60,000 times a year last year our work was downloaded. And in addition to all our research and advocacy work, we also consult directly with industry, government, and communities. We often get asked about this: is this a conflict of interest? And from our perspective, it's not. We've done this for a long time. It enables us to build our expertise and really find out what's going on, and really go toe to toe with the industry from a technical capacity. So our perspective, clearly oil sands development can never be sustainable. A fossil development of a fossil fuel can never be sustainable, but could it be more responsible? And this is certainly our perspective, as long as 4 basic preconditions are met. The first one is we need to acknowledge that there are environmental impacts that need to be addressed. Secondly, there are environmental limits that need to be established and respected, be that an environmental limit around greenhouse gas pollution, or environmental limit about unacceptable impact to a local community. Clearly, environmental limits need to be established in order to demonstrate oil sands development is responsible. Of course, free, prior, and informed consent of Aboriginal communities is essential, and then the 4th point. The revenues that are being generated from oil sands development. This is a one-time deal, and we need to make sure, if we are going to develop the oil sands, that we use that revenue to help transition to a clean energy economy. Now, the primary concern about oil sands development is, I don't think this is actually reflected in all the sort of media attention around oil sands development and all the sort of debate that currently happens. It's the pace and scale and the growth of oil sands development. This figure shows on the left-hand side where we are currently now in terms of operating approved projects on the landscape. Currently, production is actually 1.7 million barrels a day, but approved production, if companies were to get the kinks out of the system, it could be 2 million barrels a day. Now that might seem like a lot, but the challenge for the oil sands and for us who are concerned about sustainable ecosystems of communities is that the oil sands haven't even started yet. I mean, basically, we might think we have impacts now, but we're pretty much still dealing with a pre-development landscape. So if you think you have concerns about oil sands now, wait until we propose quadrupling what's happening on the landscape. So and we're moving there fast. While 2 million barrels a day of production is currently under operation, if you look at that second red circle there, in terms of what's approved and hasn't actually been built yet, companies are sitting on approvals that would take them up to 5 million barrels a day of production. So we're going to see 2.5 times increase in environmental impacts, assuming we don't see improvements in performance, just based on what's already been granted approval by regulators. And if you look at what has actually been announced and disclosed, and that is being discussed by companies in conference calls to their shareholders, and there are actually project proposals floating around that you can look at. The actual aspirations of the oil sands industry currently are to achieve 9 million barrels a day of production. So, I mean, more than 4 times what we currently see. So, I encourage anyone, if you're if you're communicating or concerned about oil sands development, really focusing on it's not the current impacts that I mean, they're a concern obviously in some cases, but it's the future impacts that we're trying to prevent and have a discussion about if this is feasible, possible, or delusional, depending on your perspective. So I'm obviously oil sands mining gets a lot of attention. I was asked today to speak about in situ, which is of course Latin for in-place extraction. This was well covered by my friends ahead of me, but we're talking about the process that it injects steam underground and brings that bitumen to the surface, which is characterized by the industry as the clean, green, new way of doing oil sands development. And why this is important is that oil sands, both mining and in situ development are both expanding. It's funny, if you spend any time in Washington, D.C., the companies and governments are telling the Americans that we're getting out of oil sands mining and moving to this in situ form of development. That's not strictly true. In situ development is getting more important, but it's mining's growing too. It's just in situ is growing at an even faster rate. And there you can see there the 1.7 million barrels a day of production, and we're going to be hitting 5 million barrels a day by 2035, just based on what's been approved currently. I think you've seen a slide like this before, and this is northern Alberta, of course. The orange areas are everywhere that's already been leased for oil sands development. That leasing happens with no environmental assessment whatsoever, no consultation. Many jurisdictions, our friends to the south in the United States on federal land, for instance, there's actually a consultation process prior to granting of oil and gas rights, but that's not how we do it up here. The light orange there is areas that are being leased for in situ oil sands development, and the dark orange area north of Fort McMurray is the area that's been leased for surface mining. That's about a 4,000 square kilometre area, and so as you can see, the area available for in situ oil sands development is actually 30 times larger than the surface mineable area. Now, I mean, as a biologist, I'm very concerned about obviously oil sands mines, but in terms of cumulative impacts, it's those in situ
impact on the forest than the mines, just because they're going to occur over such a larger landscape if we keep doing what we're doing, which again is a very different perspective to the one that you saw in that Synovus ad that Bill presented. The idea that it's the mines that are the problem, and in situ development is some kind of invisible benign land use. So what exactly is in situ oil sands development? This is an intensive land use that is going to industrialize the boreal forest. I'll just walk through the pictures on the left-hand side there. The top left picture shows some three-dimensional 3D seismic, so lines cut through the forest for geophysical exploration. Dense grid, maybe less than 100 meters apart. After that has happened, or in conjunction with that, the next picture shows the drilling of exploratory core hole wells to determine the nature of the bitumen resource. Then you have to develop well pad infrastructure where you're going to have the wellheads where the steam is injected, and obviously you need a road network and a network of above-ground pipelines to bring all that material back to a central processing facility. So, you know, this is about twice the density of infrastructure as you'd find in a conventional oil and gas field, and it's going to have significant impacts on wildlife. Here's some data from the University of Alberta, developed by the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute. Amazing research here happening at the University of Alberta that shows you can collect data and you can compare how different species prosper or don't prosper in a landscape with in situ development. And a typical in situ oil sands project has a road density of about 1 kilometre per square kilometre. And as you can see there, that means, I mean, this is all real data from hundreds of data points across northern Alberta. You're going to have half as many links on this landscape, for instance. Now, industry will say, well, I mean, clearly this is better than an oil sands mine. We're only disturbing about 8 or 9% of the landscape. There's still plenty of forest there. But this is a very fragmented forest, and any wildlife biologist will tell you that it's not just the loss of forest associated with oil and gas infrastructure that matters. There's a fragmentation effect, and you'll see lower wildlife populations and lower wildlife use in areas adjacent to areas that are disturbed. And just in this example, for instance, if you were to look at all the areas on this landscape that are within 250 meters of a road or a industry development now, you can see about 80% of the forest would be impacted to some degree. So a few years ago, Pembina Institute with the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society actually tried to bring attention to what we thought was an issue that wasn't getting much attention, which is what exactly would be the cumulative impact of just development of existing in situ projects. We did this work in 2006, and we managed to get some data from the government of Alberta that showed at that time 35,000 square kilometres of oil sands leases. That's about an area about the size of Vancouver Island had been leased for oil sands development. At the time, we raised alarm about this and said, if this landscape is developed, and we did some modelling, which I'll talk about in a second, you'll need to clear 3,000 square kilometres of forest, and you need 30,000 kilometres of new roads. You know, maybe we should develop a plan before we go down this route. Sadly, we didn't see a plan. What we saw over the past 6 years was actually another 50,000 square kilometres of land leased for in situ development. So the situation today is twice as bad as it was 5 years ago when we did this work. But I'll present this information just to give you an idea of what's coming. So what we did was actually delve into oil sands in situ project environmental impact assessments and actually tease out all the information about, when you're developing an in situ project, how many roads do you need? How many well pads do you need? How many cut lines do you need? And we actually, working with some computer mappers, actually developed a generalized footprint of a typical in situ oil sands project, which after vetting it with some associates in the oil sands industry, we thought was a reasonable assessment of a future development if you want to develop in situ projects. And what we found was a typical in situ project, as I mentioned, is going to disturb about 8% of the landscape. With that, we were able to build a model that everywhere oil sands leases have been sold, we could predict what kind of disturbance would actually occur on the landscape. And this is not real data, this is modeled data, but it shows how this is a pretty reasonable way to predict what is coming. So what does that look like? Here's a Google Earth image flying into Fort McMurray, Gregoire Lake and Anzac there. Everywhere that leases had been sold, you predict what's coming, and this is what's facing us, and it's essential that we actually start having a discussion about what these landscapes are going to look like, because things are happening incrementally, piece by piece, and these decisions are being made without a focus on the big picture. The good news is there's still time for proper management. I'm involved with a group called the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute, which is based here at the University of Alberta, and it is the world's best monitoring system for wildlife. And anyone who works for a community or is interested in getting this data, it's all publicly available, and is something that we should start using to push back against industrial proponents and the government. And what this data shows is that you can actually use this data, collect information from thousands of different species, and this is actually data from 72 different land birds, a report that was released just last week. And you can actually predict what is the current level of intactness in the boreal forest. You can see the green areas there are more than 80% intact. That means the species are still there, within 80% of their natural numbers. And obviously the orange areas, which if you look at this map, are areas at the southern edge of the forest and in the Peace River country. Clearly places where the forest has been removed for agriculture. Finally, when this report came out 2 weeks ago, the oil sands industry was quick to jump on this and say, "Well, this is evidence that the oil sands is the best managed part of Alberta. Look how green it is." And again, I think misses the point that they haven't got there yet. But I think it's important to note, the landscapes we care about, the Treaty 8 territory, is the most intact landscape in Alberta. So I think we often so focused on talking about the impacts that exist that we sort of almost devalue that landscape and forget the fact that we should be working to protect what is there, because these are amazing landscapes that are worth fighting for. So our recommendations in 2006 were you need to develop a regional plan to inform leasing and project approvals. There's been no progress on planning informing leasing. Leasing still happens every 2 weeks. You can request any land be posted for sale and purchase it. We've seen no slowdown in project approvals. We have seen, of course, a plan for the Lower Athabasca, which I'll talk about in a moment. We said lease sales approvals should be halted until a plan in place. That hasn't happened. We said there's a need to establish conservation areas, to establish cumulative effects limits, implement planning standards for industry, and require mandatory best practices. At best, we've made progress on about 1.5 of these 6 things in the past 6 years. Next, I want to just talk about woodland caribou, which I think is a threatened species in Canada and Alberta, and is a really good example of a sort of sensitive early warning system of where mismanagement is going to get us. We know caribou avoid infrastructure. That we know there's increased predation due to the forest being fragmented, wolves being able to access places where caribou are found. This is a sort of we know more about woodland caribou in Alberta, I would guess, than any other species in Canada. So, I mean, in terms of Western science has actually told us everything we need to know in terms of how caribou respond to development and what we need to do if we want to protect those caribou. The problem is we haven't actually taken that information and used it for anything. There's been 15 years of management in action. So this is northeastern Alberta again. Hopefully you can navigate there. There are those 3 oil sands regions. The areas in green are the caribou ranges in northeastern Alberta. And as you can see there, over the past decade, our government has basically leased almost every inch of caribou range for oil sands development, mostly in situ oil sands development. And unsurprisingly, if you look at the status of caribou across Canada, these are all the woodland caribou ranges across Canada. And again, the green ranges are ones that are healthy and, in the language of the federal government, are thought to be self-sustaining. That is, they might survive. The ones in red and orange are, in desperate need of help, management, intervention. And as you can see there in Alberta, we have the we have our caribou are in the worst state anywhere in the country. Here's some real data for woodland caribou northeastern Alberta. Again, amazingly well studied caribou herd. The east side of the Athabasca River caribou herd ranges south of Fort McMurray, around Conklin and Janvier, all the way down to almost to Cold Lake. We've seen a 65% decline in caribou numbers in the past 16 years. I mean, just a shocking level of decline, and this these kinds of declines are happening across northeastern Alberta. Yep. Question. Yeah, this is data from the Alberta Caribou Committee that's available publicly. It hasn't been updated since 2008, so it's not our data. I think there are also collars on caribou in the Cold Lake area, and the Cold Lake caribou population is also in decline. Yeah, I would. I'd encourage you to speak to the University of Alberta here. The Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute is doing a lot of monitoring, and I'm sure they'd be happy to collaborate. Yeah, the problem with caribou is they're very hard to spot from the air. So we don't actually have accurate population numbers. The only way we can determine that the populations are increasing or decreasing is actually flying every year and seeing whether caribou that have a collar on them are surviving, and if they had a calf, and by looking at the difference between the number of calves appearing versus the number of caribou that are surviving, you can tell whether the population is going up or down. In the whole of northeastern Alberta, you're probably looking at less than 1,500 caribou now. In the whole northeast. In this range of maybe a few hundred. Yeah, yeah. 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 You are one step ahead of me. Can I have some slides about that? I'll talk about that. So there's some interesting things happening in northeastern Alberta. It is true that there is a problem with calf survival. The calves are dying. They're being eaten by wolves, and the populations are declining. So as a result of that, wolves are being scapegoated as the cause of the problem, and we're already seeing in parts of Alberta, in the Little Smoky, wolves are being killed. Of course, it's actually much more complicated than that. Wolves and caribou have lived together for 10,000 years in Alberta without a problem, and what we're seeing is as we change the forest, as we cut down the trees and create new growth, it attracts deer, which increases wolf numbers. As we cut roads and seismic lines through places where caribou are found, wolves use those areas as highways. So the real problem is habitat, and the wolves are just a symptom of that, of the changes we've made to the habitat. So I mean, as a result of that, you now have this debate raging. You've seen industry, realizing they have a serious public relations problem around the declining caribou, and I think it's almost taking an engineering approach to the problem. Well, if you want more caribou, we'll grow you some more caribou, and proposals to build 1,500 square kilometre fenced enclosures where all the predators would be killed or removed within those enclosures, and oil sands and caribou would be allowed within the exclosure. I mean, obviously there's been no consultation of First Nations on this, and I would imagine your perspective is be going through the bush to hit this fence, telling you that only caribou and oil sands are allowed on the other side of the fence. I think I can guess your perspective on on that. But
another problem, like we had a protected area, caribou protected area up on Stony Mountain there, and there was one place caribou were calving. They were Scott Oil was got their farm. All of a sudden, a couple of years ago, last year, I seen a map and it said the caribou are calving on the other side of the highway about 20 miles away. What happened?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, there. Yeah.
Calving there for thousands of years. How come they're calving over here now because there's got development?
Absolutely, and I think the calving period is certainly when they're most sensitive. Exactly. So, yeah.
Animals follow natural law. Animals can leave behind animals and will not stop at a fence. How are you going to keep them in that fence area?
Well, I think it's. I mean, clearly, as I'll get to here, I mean, the symptom of the ultimate cause of the problem is changes to habitat, and we should be encouraging industry if they want to be seen as part of the solution. They should be working on conserving habitat, both in the region and in terms of restoring their landscapes. And we shouldn't, from their perspective, let them take the easy way out, which is to artificially manage caribou on the landscape. It's not consistent with our Species at Risk Act, and it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars that I think would be wasted in terms that could be invested elsewhere. And so what you're seeing here is talks about either wolf culls or the idea of fencing. The recovery strategy, the federal recovery strategy for woodland caribou was actually released last Friday after close of business, after 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the Friday before the Thanksgiving long weekend. It was 5 years overdue its legal deadline, so I think it gives you some idea of why the government released it then. But it actually, obviously, it doesn't actually change anything on the ground. But one good thing about the recovery strategy is that it does identify the fact that for the first time we got a real acknowledgement that caribou need habitat, and 65% undisturbed habitat per range is the magic number if you want to keep caribou on that landscape. So that's that dotted line bar there. This is the current status of the amount of undisturbed caribou habitat in the 5 ranges in northeastern Alberta. So they're between currently 40% and 15% intact. You can see the state of Cold Lake there. So if you're ever working, concerned about caribou or in discussions with regulators or industry, how are we going to get to 65% intact? And to get to 65% intact, that means you've actually got to start making things better, not worse. Which again ties to the idea of industry wants to increase its activity by fourfold. We still haven't come for a solution on caribou. That being said, Pembina Institute, we like to identify problems, but we're more interested in trying to make progress on solutions, and there is a lot of stuff that can be done here. The first one is that if our provincial and federal governments aren't going to lead on planning, then First Nations and communities should lead that planning. And I know it's always a problem with resources, but we're seeing some excellent pieces of work. Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation released a report this year, "We Are the Stewards of Our Land," which outlines a really progressive set of maps and plans and rules for development within their traditional territory, which is far superior to anything that we've seen from the provincial government. The government of Alberta, after many years of really doing no planning, has actually started and committed to doing plans across Alberta. And the first region they looked at was this lower Athabasca region. This took years of work, and There are some big gaps and some big problems with this plan, but there are some things that are worthy of note. This is northeastern Alberta. All these green areas that have been identified. The plan does outline 1.2 million hectares of new conservation areas. Now they're in areas that are of lower value to industry, but this is the largest conservation announcement in Alberta in 80 years, and and will actually result in the buyback of some oil sands leases. So a small step to addressing some of these issues. That being said, there were some really significant gaps in the Lower Athabasca Regional Plan as well. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the point here in terms of. There was very weak, my understanding, and there was very weak Aboriginal consultation on the plan. No Aboriginal co-management of any of these areas, which I know is something the communities have been pushing for. The critical thing is, though it made progress on some new conservation areas, as you said, what happens in everywhere else on the landscape? We need to be talking about conservation and management on the whole landscape, and there was supposed to be something called the Biodiversity Management Framework, which has been delayed another year. No limits in the plan for land. There are limits for air and water, and I think that's where we really need to make progress to say, we might not be happy with those limits for air and water, but there's a recognition that there's a point at which the air pollution is too much, or there's too much water being taken out. For land, we never actually got to the point where we recognize there are limits, and of course, no caribou plan, and Lee talked a lot about the wetland policy. Yeah. Well, as I say, there were many gaps in there, which we should hold government accountable to for filling the gaps. And it is better than nothing, but there is still a long way to go. Yeah. Well, it's some industry leases have been cancelled and bought back. So some development that was going to occur is going to be taken off the landscape. But is it enough? Absolutely not. But at the same time, there are many industry who prefer to have no planning whatsoever. So I think we should push for better planning all the time. But I think it's always important to in Alberta and in Canada, we don't tend to look outside our borders very much. But Pembina looked at some numbers and said, well, is Alberta and Canada actually a leader in land conservation, and how do we actually compare to some other countries around the world in terms of progress here? Considering Alberta is probably the richest jurisdiction in the world, we should be able to have the both a robust economy and the best some of the most environmental standards in the world. And look at this. You compare some of the how it is that Botswana and Guatemala are able to conserve 30% of their landscapes, and our friends in New Zealand, Tanzania. It's quite interesting in terms of we like to think of ourselves as environmental leaders, but I think we're trading on a reputation of that just we have a low population and are slowly disturbing our landscapes. So some other solutions. Clearly land use planning. The government has committed to land use planning in all other Alberta regions, and there is the ability to influence that. Again, in terms of, we are all constrained by a lack of resources. But if you're able to get your values identified ahead of this system to inform this system, there's certainly hope to make progress. We clearly need to make progress on cumulative effects limits for land, conservation planning, and we need to hold the industry to far higher expectations for cleaning up as they go along. Copy of our report here, which goes into detail in terms of to give you some idea of what in situ development is going to look like on this landscape and why we should be concerned about it, is available at our website here, and I'd be happy to take any questions. So thank you very much.